To all of you, I appreciate it. I was told that this room is filled with Republicans and with Democrats. And I'm reminded of a line from Eisenhower, actually President Eisenhower, who said that the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. One of the things I say everywhere I go is that I don't give a different talk depending who I'm talking to. I don't give a different talk if you're black, if you're white, if you're brown, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, rich, poor, gay, straight. We've all got to come out of our silos right now. And that includes left versus right. We say that we don't like all the opposition and how polarized we are, but we keep ourselves polarized if we only look at any of this through the filter of who I am, my people, as opposed to who we are. The problem right now is what's happening to us, not just happening to me or what's happening to my group. If you're a Jewish American, a Christian American, a Muslim American, a gay American, it's the American part that we have to concern ourselves with now, which is not to minimize the importance of our separate identities, but we are keeping ourselves in a conversation which doesn't speak to the heart of the matter sometimes. We have forgotten our national identity. We've forgotten the purpose of our country. And within that space, we are blind to things. And out of that blindness, some very dangerous things have occurred. I lived in Michigan for 8 years. I raised my daughter here. And I pastored at the Church of Today, then called Renaissance Unity in Warren, Michigan. That is how I know some of the people here. Before I lived in Michigan, I had worked a lot with people who are ill, dying. My career began as an activist around the AIDS crisis. I was pastoring there as well. And my career in those years before I came to Michigan had to do with being with people in some of the darkest times of their lives. The test results came back, it was cancer. You find out your child is on heroin. You find out your only option is bankruptcy, whatever it was. And it was a very privileged, I feel it's been a great privilege that people have invited me into their lives in some of their darkest moments. But in the first 20 years of my career, those hours, those times, those experiences were the exceptions and not the rule. And what I found when I came to Michigan was how many people I knew whose times of despair were the rule and not the exception. And I couldn't figure it out for a long time. Why is somebody's life in a state of constant crisis? And I realized when I saw so many people whose lives were in a state of constant crisis that it was due to bad public policy. They didn't have health care. They couldn't live on just one job. Their kids went to school where they were afraid of the physical safety of the child. Their neighborhoods were not safe. They couldn't send their kids to college. Now, I'm old enough to remember a time when we had a thriving middle class in America. I'm old enough to remember the 70s, when the average American worker had decent benefits and could afford a house, and the average American worker could afford a car, and the average American worker could afford a yearly vacation, and the average American couple, if they wanted to, one child could stay home. One parent could stay home to be with the kids, and that American couple could afford to send their kids to college. That was called a thriving middle class. And it was when I came to Michigan that I realized how many people were not part of that, who were the people who I had been raised to believe these are the people who will thrive in America because they work hard and they try to do the right thing. And I realized that that's not just in Michigan, that's everywhere. 70% of the American people say they live with chronic economic stress. 62% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt, and every other advanced democracy has universal health care. 1/3 of America's workforce lives on less than $15 an hour, and half of them cannot find a place to live. Every other advanced democracy has universal higher education, which we had in this country until the 1970s. And I realized, and when I would talk to people, but now you look at it, the polls are there. The average The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want tuition-free college and tech school. But the American people have been trained to expect too little. The American people have just been taught to limit our political imagination. And what I find in both parties is too often a conversation that doesn't speak to the heart of the matter, that doesn't speak to where people live. They'll do anything to avoid things like the fact that 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. 1.3 million Americans they ration their insulin. When I gave a talk in England recently, when I said that over 1 million people in our country ration insulin, they can't even imagine it, of course, because they have universal health care. I have spoken to people in this country. I have spoken to people who have to make a choice every month. It has to do with my insulin or my rent. And these are people who are working full time. The level of despair out there is unsustainable. And that's, I think, the main message here. It can't continue. It's going to blow. It's already blowing. We're living in the midst of it now. And this is a time for us to get on top of this because it's going to blow in one direction or the other. It's either going to blow in the direction of greater democracy and greater justice, particularly economic justice. Right now you have 20% of Americans for whom the economy is great, and I celebrate that. But 80% of Americans are left out of that. Making money is good, making money is wonderful, but too many people in this country never have a chance to create wealth. They're locked in, and that is at this point a majority of Americans. And when Lincoln stood on the battlefield at Gettysburg, and he said that the men who died there had given their last full measure of devotion, he said, so that a government of the people and by the people and for the people would not perish from the earth. It's perishing now. This is not a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It is a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. Whether it's insurance companies or big pharmaceutical companies or big food companies, the carcinogens in our food. Have you ever read about the difference between a ketchup bottle here versus a ketchup bottle in Canada and Europe? Because the carcinogens that we have for some big food company to make more money so it has a longer shelf life. Big agricultural companies and what they've done to our farming sector. Big chemical companies. The chemicals in our pesticides that harm a child's brain. Big oil companies that we're ramping up fossil fuel extraction instead of ramping it down. And I don't care if they're a Democrat or Republican president, they fall in line. And wars that have been fought in our lifetime, whether Iraq or the last 20 years of Afghanistan that we know have more to do with profits for defense industries. And what I have seen in Washington is that this is now baked into the cake. That system will not disrupt itself. And of course they would say about someone like myself that I'm not qualified, because to them that means qualified to continue, to perpetuate, to maintain the system as it is. And I think that if we do not intervene, this is supposed to be about we the people. This is not supposed to be about political parties. There's nothing about that in our Constitution. This is not supposed to be a political or media elite that sort of knows more than we do. This is supposed to be the people. And I'm a bit of a romantic about American democracy. I think that our Declaration of Independence is our mission statement. It's our North Star. And it says that governments are instituted to secure the rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And it says that if the government is not doing its job, then it's the right of the people to alter that. And that system that I just described to you, which makes life pretty good for 20% of us, and is creating so much despair. This is going to be like 2016, everyone. This is not going to be like 2020. This is going to be like 2016. There is too much despair out there. And if we do not take control of this and move towards greater justice and democracy, we will have greater chaos and we will have greater violence, and we could have something much, much worse than that. So I believe this country needs a course correction. We answered slavery with abolition. We answered the institutionalized oppression of women with the women's suffrage movement. We answered the Gilded Age with the establishment of organized labor. And we answered the segregation of the American South and institutionalized suppression of black people with the civil rights movement. And I think it's our turn now. And it's got to be an inside-outside approach. And Michigan is certainly showing us what the outside approach is with those UAW strikes. The reinvigoration of the labor movement is an important part of this correction. But we need a correction in government as well. And I'm a Democrat. I'm a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Democrat. And he said that we would not have fascist takeover in this country as long as democracy delivered on its blessings. And we're in trouble now because democracy is not delivering on its blessings. And for those of us who are Democrats, or for those of us who, for whatever reason, do not want to see Donald Trump return to the White House, we're not going to defeat Donald Trump by just scaring everybody about Donald Trump. We're going to defeat Donald Trump by offering the American people a much better deal. Universal health care like in every other advanced democracy, tuition-free college like in every other advanced democracy, subsidized child care like in every other advanced democracy, paid family leave like in every other advanced democracy, guaranteed sick pay like in every other advanced democracy, and guaranteed living wage like in every other advanced democracy. And if I'm president of the United States, we sure will try. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll take questions. We'll let you call on the people, please.
Yes, sir.
A couple people in this room sounds like a broken record. What I'm going to say.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Around this world, our future, which is controlled in most of this world by men. All right. Our future is women and children. And all around this world, they're being abused, they're being killed, they're being misused by men who are in control. It's that simple. Now, until you figure out how to change our future and save our future, which are women and children, from men who are in control, all right, you're not going to change anything. And we're doomed. I hate to say that, but that's it. I'm a retired vice president. I worked 42 years as a hourly person, okay? And besides that other job I held, I was also the person who controlled everything for the hourly involvement at the global prototype plant. And when you start talking about your future with cars, know this, you're going to cost lives because it's all experimental.
Okay. So as far as the issue of women, you said that it sound like a broken record. We don't hear that nearly enough from men, so we thank you. Thank you. And I think electing the first woman president would be a great way to begin. But I do want to speak very seriously to this. One of the items in my platform is the establishment of a Department of Peace. Now, peace building is an actual thing. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Peace building skills have to do with waging peace. Even Donald Rumsfeld said, we must learn to wage peace. Peace is not the absence of violence. Violence is the absence of peace. There are 4 factors which statistically mean if these things are present in a corner of an American city or a different corner of the world, if these 4 factors are present, there will be a higher incidence of peace and a lower incidence of violence. Number 1, greater economic opportunities for women. Number 2, greater educational opportunities for children. Number 3, a reduction of violence against women. And number 4, the amelioration of unnecessary human despair. So you are absolutely correct, sir. Violence against women and lack of educational opportunities for women is an indicator of a greater probability of violence. Now, what we do in our country now and what happens around the world is instead of creating peace, and what happens when you have large groups of desperate people, and where women are being consistently violated, when violence against women, lack of economic opportunity, lack of educational opportunity, that adds up to human desperation. Large groups of desperate people become a petri dish out of which all manner of societal and personal dysfunction is almost inevitable, including ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. If all we do to respond to that is build more prisons and drop more bombs, then you're right, sir. The future of our democracy and the future of our world is at stake. So I could not agree with you more, and that's why I stand for Department of Peace and recognize that the idea of greater economic opportunities for women, educational opportunities for children, and reduction of violence against women should not be something we treat like a peripheral issue. Oh, we'll do what you can. You look at the size of our defense budget at $858 billion, then you look at our State Department at 1/10 of that, and then about 1/10 of that is the USAID with the kind of humanitarian assistance that truly involves making the world a more peaceful place. Thank you for acknowledging it. I thank you on behalf of all the women who are in this room. Yes, sir.
I got a couple of things we need to think about. We talked about earlier how we are all Americans. I'm certain that you and many people are aware that many groups of people were made not to feel like they were Americans, particularly those of us of color. And I believe that America has been also founded on the necessity of an underclass, a need to keep a certain amount of population in a, let's say, a suppressed manner for the rest of the country to thrive. And also, so there is this inherent, I believe there's this inherent tribalism that is in our society. And yes, it affects women. It also affects people of color, both genders especially African Americans and Native Americans, and Hispanics as well. My question is, how are you going to, ensure protections for those groups who have been traditionally viewed as the underclass so much that one of the oppositions to the ACA were, let's say, were mainstream people saying, I don't want to have this because it's going to benefit them. And how do we get past that? How do we ensure that this could be a country for all Americans?
Well, first we have to accept and recognize that what you said is true. That the way our economy works today, there is a permanent underclass. And I think to even sort of take that into our hearts. The way our economy works today, there is a permanent underclass. You turn on any television today, and you will hear some pundit talking about how the economy is good. Now, like I said, I pastored at a church. I have a philosophical background. You be careful with that word good around me. Good? We have the highest level of poverty of any other advanced democracy. And we have the highest level of child poverty. Even when we cut child poverty in half, first of all, my thought when everybody was bragging about cutting child poverty in half was something's wrong with this country that we accept that there's any child poverty in the richest country in the world. We have over 30% of Americans now, and take this in, please, in your hearts. In the richest country in the world, over 30% of our people say they regularly skip meals. This is, unfortunately, a permanent middle class. It's baked into the cake, and it is a collateral damage, what is considered an acceptable collateral damage. And you're right, and that's why I'm running. No, this is not acceptable. And this is why I'm talking about universal health care, why I'm talking about tuition-free college and tech school, why I'm talking about canceling the debt, while I'm talking about subsidized child care, while I'm talking about paid family leave, while I'm talking about guaranteed sick pay, while I'm talking about a guaranteed living wage. We have a minimum wage of $7.25. In any major city in America, a living wage is over $20. an hour. So the worst disparity is economic. That is the worst disparity that affects all the groups that you mentioned. And what in my platform, I have the 21st century version of Franklin Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights.
I just want to do a quick add-on to that.
Pardon?
If you don't mind just doing a quick add-on to
Please.
that. I mean, one thing I want to mention is that, yeah, FDR did apply those. It's one of the reasons why I respect the man. However, again, those benefits were also applied unequally. For example, the GI Bill, soldiers of color were excluded from that. There were a lot of benefits that were meant to apply to the general American public that people of color were especially shunted from. And it happens to this day. A lot of the benefits that Americans have gotten, even now, there are many people of color that are still taken up for various reasons. How are you going to ensure that those people get included in? And also, and I'm going to, I hope my friends here will forgive me for going a little extra here, just out of curiosity, and I just ask as a neutral question, what is your stance on reparations?
Well, I'm the only presidential candidate who does have a plan for reparations. I brought it up in the Democratic debates last time. I was the one who brought it up, and notice when I was out, and everybody had to talk about it. When I was out of the race, it was conveniently something nobody had to talk about anymore. So I have talked about that because, as I mentioned, I pastored. It is a religious and spiritual and personal growth concept that you cannot have the future you want if you won't clean up the past. Whether it's a Catholic at confession or a Jew on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, or in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, acknowledging your own character defects. I don't think this country can have the future we want if we don't clean that up. And we've gone far towards cleaning it up. The Voting Rights Act in the 1960s, the Civil Rights Act, and I think that if Johnson had been president, or even if Humphrey had won in '68, and certainly if Dr. King had lived, I think that was the sort of third piece that they would have gotten to, financial remuneration, because that was definitely in the air, and it was tragically cut short. In terms of Roosevelt, I just want to say, yeah, he turned back votes of Jews, too. Nobody's saying he was a perfect person any more than anybody's saying Jefferson didn't have slaves. But I think it's important that we realize the extraordinary things that have happened in our past, even at the hands of perfect people. What you're saying is definitely true. Even the GI Bill, Roosevelt wanted the GI Bill to be universal education for everyone. And you're right, it was the racist senators in the South who blocked that. But this is how I just see this in general, if I may. I think that we have to be very compassionate for our country right now because we have to look at some things that are difficult to look at. I think we have to be very emotionally mature that way. And I find some Americans, all they want to do is look at what America has done right, but they don't have any listening for things which as mature Americans we have to look at that we've done wrong or we are doing wrong and we have to correct. But then I find some people today only want to talk about what we've done wrong. And that is equally unbalanced because we've done a lot right. I mean, we're people. That's true of each of us here. We've gotten it right sometimes, we've gotten it wrong sometimes. And the people who love us, don't let us forget either one. Do you know what I mean? So you're right about some things in the past, and for everything you talked about was right, including today. So I don't think anybody in this room is denying examples of systemic racism, et cetera. And I think it's part of the way we honor our ancestors to realize all the ways things have improved, must continue to improve, just as some things have actually gone backwards. Yes, sir.
You mentioned universal health care, and I don't know what that means. In my career, I had the privilege to work in a couple dozen different countries around the world. I was hospitalized in the United Kingdom. The ward that I was in had 25 beds. The only privacy you had was a curtain. to me, universal health care is a term that gets thrown around and not well defined, and it's not the same everywhere. And in my personal experience, it's not a good thing. And in those countries that have universal health care, the people of means also have private insurance, and they still get better care than the people who are using the universal health care. So I would like to hear your ideas about universal health care for the United States.
We have 18 million Americans who cannot afford to pay for the prescriptions that their doctors give them. I heard a doctor here in Detroit, actually in Michigan, who told me that if it was 20 years ago, if a patient came in and she prescribed a particular treatment, that person would say, what are the side effects? And that today the most common question is, what would it cost? There are 85 million Americans who are in the category not necessarily of uninsured but underinsured. There are millions of Americans whose insurance will cover for them to go to the doctor, but it will not cover the treatment the doctor prescribes, will not cover the medicine, it will not cover the operation. So that, as another doctor, a cardiologist in Texas, told me, I don't even know why I bother to practice medicine anymore. They come in and I know what they need and they can't afford it. So we have a Medicare system, and Medicare for all means Medicare for all. Now, you're right, whether we're talking about Germany, England, Australia, there are none of them are perfect. Some of them work more perfectly than others. I agree with you about also the option of private insurance. But at this point, the fact that people are rationing insulin, the fact that people cannot afford, the fact that 68,000 Americans die every year. 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. Those people died, and I think it would have been okay with them to be in a ward with 25 people if it meant survival.
But these people are having to be on wait lists for routine stuff, and they have to wait months.
Nobody, I don't think anybody, if we're convening a group of experts on this topic, which I look forward to doing, nobody would be saying, wow, England has it all perfect. On the other hand, I will tell you a story. I mean, these are anecdotal. Yours was anecdotal. This is mine is anecdotal. My daughter lives in London. I woke up one night, this was several years ago, I woke up one night between my waist and my breastbone, it was like razor blades. I've never experienced anything like it. They later think it was an attack with gastritis. Nobody knows for sure. I'm in such...
The English food.
Pardon? No, it was actually a terrible thing. And I'm on the floor, it was terrible. An ambulance comes. They take me to the hospital. They give me all kinds of tests. They took good care of me. They gave me some medicine. They said they thought it was this. When you go back to the United States, go to your doctor. This will hold you over. But the tests and the care and all that I got. And then when I left and I asked, how much do I owe you? They looked at me like I was, owe me? Now, if I was in England, I think I'd have a problem, actually, to be honest, with an American getting that kind. I paid nothing. And I have thought many times, like when I've thought about why did that even happen, I think God wanted me to see what that looked like. What can you imagine what that would have been if I had been in the United States? Can you imagine? 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. So to me, when you ask how you pay for it, right now people are paying for it with our lives. So you say, how are we going to pay for health insurance? We're paying for it with our lives that people don't have health insurance. And I believe, and also it would be better for businesses. Wouldn't have to worry about it. So I hear you, sir. And I don't think that, perfect. Medicare is not perfect. But Medicare is, no, I don't think anybody wants to give it up. So all we're talking about is lowering that aid so that everyone is covered. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
352 days to the election. How did you choose to join us here in Dexter today?
How did I choose to go to Dexter? Well, as you know, now Michigan is an early primary state. I'm on the ballot here in New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and Michigan. These are the states that you concentrate on. I'm on the ballot in other states as well, but and this is what you do when you're running for president. I'm at 13% in the Quinnipiac poll last week. And that is actually quite extraordinary, given that there has been a real media blackout on me. That's just kind of, I think, should be disturbing to every American, to be honest.
Is there a media?
Pardon?
Is there a media?
There's, unfortunately, the journalistic integrity is greatly lacking on both sides of the political spectrum in this country today. Does that make sense, sir? And so you go, I think, were you, Alex, the one who is the connection to here today?
I told her about the Dexter Forum. We're doing an event in Ypsilanti Township tomorrow at 3:30, and I wanted to promote her. I saw her platform. I loved everything, and I visited the Dexter Forum 3 or 4 times. And in our conversation, I told her, as an African American growing up in Ypsilanti Township, Washtenaw County, I wasn't always comfortable coming to Dexter. And when I went to the Fletcher Forum in Ypsi, I was embarrassed at the level of conversation I was there. So when I came to the Dexter Forum, I was blown away. You guys are cool. It's a great discussion. I told her, I emphasized that it's truly all strata people from the community that are seriously involved in the community and seriously care about it. And you get it, and I'm just so jealous of the discussion that you get here. So I told her about the Dexter Forum.
And tell people you're running in Ypsilanti right now.
Now, this isn't my stump speech, because I told Carl, we got to get that weight tested. and I'm coming back after I finish some dental work, and I'm going to give an awesome stump speech. I told her Jennifer Collin gave the best one that I'd seen here before. But I'm running for Township Supervisor of Ypsilanti Township. Ypsilanti Township is the second largest municipality in Washtenaw County. Many of the issues that Marianne is talking about today, just with the numbers, I think about, we had a township supervisor that went to Kenya during a trip. I looked up, the life expectancy in Kenya was 66. For African American males in Ypsilanti Township, it was 63 pre-COVID. You know, we have horrible health disparities in Washtenaw County. Our law enforcement system consumes 70% of the county budget. Please ask me about that later. So I was a little wary because I stayed focused on local politics. I think, you know, politics are local, and that's how we affect things. So that's what I've been focused on. But when I heard about Marianne, looked at her platform, I was like, how are we ever going to get what we want if we don't talk about it?
Thank you.
Stand up for it.
Hello.
Yeah, I brought her here.
Isn't he great? You know, I have to say, this is the new America. This is the new America. There's a lot of love for what's possible, but there's also a lot of like, certain stuff's got to stop now. This is why I also want a Department of Children and Youth. We 20 years from now, we must pay more attention to our 10-year-olds today. We must. I think children are the greatest collateral damage of the malevolent strain of economics that we have in this world today. They're not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. I want to convene the greatest minds that we have in this country, particularly on early childhood. We have 90% of the human brain is developed before the age of 5. And I want you to hear me when I tell you this, because I think too many Americans, I don't think I'm telling you anything we don't already know, but we need a space for conversation where we really take it in. We have children in elementary school in this country on suicide watch. We have regularly in public schools throughout this country trauma rooms. So everybody now talks about trauma-informed education, social emotional learning, which is great. But I remember when I first heard about trauma-informed education, I was like, this is so good. We're really moving forward. And then I said to myself, why are millions of American children in such trauma? What is going on in this country that there are so many traumatized children? That's what I mean. We need the political establishment in America today speaks too often to symptoms and not to root causes. And with all due respect to some people in Washington, not you, Debbie Dingell, too many people don't want to talk about root causes because they are the root causes. And that's why I believe someone from outside the system for 4 years would be a very good idea. Yes, sir.
I agree with you that we can't beat Donald Trump by just scaring people about it, saying, look at the bad man. Because polling just showed his popularity, or lack thereof, has not increased, but Joe Biden's has gone down. And in a recent, that same poll, anonymous Democrat was beating Joe Biden. So people want somebody else. But like you said, how do we get the word out? Obviously, we can share it ourselves, but people don't seem to be like. I don't think I heard your name on that poll. It was anonymous Democrat, and so but people obviously want an alternative.
Okay, so let's.
And I'm glad to hear that you're on the ballot. And
There are a couple of things you're saying that are extremely important. I want to take on both categories. First of all, for those of us who are Democrats, or for those of us who do not wish to see Trump, the electoral risk to Democrats in 2024 is not the people voting for Trump. They're going to vote for Trump no matter what. And they'll vote for him even if he's in prison. I heard Juan Castro say on TV, Democrats have to spend more resources reminding Americans how bad a president he was. That's so ridiculous. And they're going to vote for him. The risk for Democrats in 2024 is people staying home. They're not going to do it. They stood in line for hours for a higher minimum wage. They stood in line for hours for the codification of voting rights. They stood in lines for hours for something that has to do with police reform. Some of the people who are the most unique, they're not going to do it. I'll tell you who else is not going to do it. Young people. The minute he approved the Willow Project. So these young people are very hip to what's happening environmentally. And they know that the man who calls himself a climate president, the man who put healthy investments in green energy, admittedly healthy investments in green energy in the Inflation Reduction Act, on the other hand, gave more oil drilling permits than even Trump did. And if you take those oil drilling permits and you add the approval of the Willow Project, the $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil extraction program on the North Slopes of Alaska, you've completely nullified all those benefits. And young people just aren't having it. Now, the second thing, why isn't my name there? Think about everything I've said here today and you'll know. So I want to say this. Political parties are not mentioned in the Constitution. And George Washington warned us in his farewell address. He said that they would his fear was that they would form factions of men more loyal to their party than to their country. Political parties traditionally stand in the back, then the voters decide who the nominee is, and then the political party comes forward. The DNC now overtly has said that it sees its mission as re-electing the president. And CNN and MSNBC, I'm sorry, but they fall in line. The erasure of me from the conversation. Nikki Haley is at 16%, and it's considered a surge. She's the whole segment's news shows about it. I'm at 13%, and it is not mentioned. The invisibilization, the erasure, and that's why. Because they've already decided who they want. And even if it's not the president, there is a political media industrial complex in this country, and their idea of someone qualified is they think only if you've got a career driving the car into the ditch should you be considered qualified to drive it out. I agree with Franklin Roosevelt, who said that the primary responsibility of the presidency is not administrative, but moral leadership. The problem is not that we don't have enough good political car mechanics in Washington. We have a lot of them. The problem is we're on the wrong road. And I think there are many kinds of experiences that lead to what is necessary in America at this time. Yes?
if people allow me to quickly follow up. Personally, I am independent. I voted all different both parties, and I voted independent. But now the Republican Party has lost me completely because of them following Trump and various things.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, to your point, I know people though that voted for Trump, then voted for Biden, and are now considering voting for Trump again. So it's not just the people that are.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Some people, the Democrat Party is losing those people that voted last time. So you're right. It's going to be more like 2016.
And that's why leaving out voices like mine is, first of all, it's undemocratic.
Yeah.
First of all, it's undemocratic. If you say you're the champion of democracy, then let all voices be heard. And when you say, what do you do about that? What I'm doing here today, this is American politics. This is it. Talking to voters, I mean, this is the beauty of our system, actually. But you're right, too many people don't even know that I'm running, and they keep saying they want more choices, and then the DNC continues to try to put the lid on it. And the people who conspire with that, I would say this even if it wasn't me, they should be ashamed of themselves.
So this has been a wonderful conversation. We're just going to,
Yeah.
9:25, I think we're just going to stop just so we can give a couple local announcements.
Yeah, if I may, I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We can end an aberrational chapter of American history, and we can begin again. I appreciate so much all of you giving me an opportunity to talk to you. I hope that you will look at my website, marianne2024.com. I hope that you will sign up so that we can tell you when I'm in Michigan. And I just want to say, I think of a presidential campaign, or any political campaign really, as a long job interview. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell you what I would do with the job if you give me the honor. Thank you very, very much. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.